The dust cloud settled behind the departing wagon as Isabella stood alone in front of the Carter farmhouse. Her weathered suitcase heavy in her grip, September sun hung low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the endless fields of wheat that stretched toward the distant mountains. Everything here felt vast and empty, like the silence that had followed her from the orphanage all those years ago, gray as storm clouds and just as distant. "You're Isabella," he said. It wasn't a question. She nodded, finding her voice. "Yes. Mr. Carter, thank you for just Nathan." He studied her for a moment, his gaze neither welcoming nor unkind, simply assessing. "You look tired? Long journey?" 3 days by train, then the wagon." She shifted her weight, suddenly aware of how travel-worn she must appear. "I'm grateful you agreed to this arrangement." Something flickered across his face, too quick to read. "We both needed something. That's enough." He gestured toward the house. "Come on, I'll show you around." The farmhouse was larger than it had appeared from outside, with a wide front porch and tall windows that would let in plenty of light during the day. Now, with evening approaching, the glass reflected the dying sun like closed eyes. Nathan led her up the wooden steps, which creaked under their weight. "Built this place myself," he said, pushing open the front door. "Took 3 years." Inside, the house was clean but sparse. The furniture was handmade and practical: a wooden table, chairs that matched nothing but served their purpose, shelves that held books and tools in equal measure. Everything spoke of function over form, of a man who had learned to need very little. "Your room's upstairs," Nathan said, climbing the narrow staircase. "Mine's at the end of the hall. There's a wash basin and pitcher up there, fresh linens on the bed." Isabella followed him up, noting how the floorboards didn't squeak under his. Steppy knew exactly where to place his feet. The upstairs hallway was dim, lit only by the last traces of daylight from a window at the far end. "This one's yours." He opened a door to reveal a modest room with a single bed, a dresser, and a chair by the window. The view looked out over the back fields, where the wheat swayed in the evening breeze like ocean waves. "It's perfect," she said, and meant it. After years of shared rooms and borrowed spaces, having something entirely her own felt like a luxury. Nathan nodded curtly. "I'll leave you to settle in. Supper's at 6. Nothing fancy." He was gone before she could respond, his footsteps receding down the hallway. Isabella closed the door and sat on the edge of the bed, her suitcase beside her. The room smelled of fresh wood, and Lavender Samine had made an effort to prepare it for her arrival. She unpacked her few belongings: 2 dresses, a nightgown, her brush and mirror, the small collection of books that had been her constant companions. As she arranged them on the dresser, she caught sight of herself in the mirror. Her brown hair had come loose from its pins during the journey, and her green eyes looked uncertain in the fading light. This was her new life. A marriage of convenience to a man she'd met through a series of letters, each one more businesslike than the last. She'd answered his advertisement out of desperation. More than Hapa, woman alone in the world had few choices, and fewer still that offered any measure of security. The sound of movement downstairs reminded her that she wasn't alone anymore. For better or worse, she was part of someone else's life now, and he was part of hers. At 6 o'clock, sharp, she made her way downstairs to find Nathan setting 2 plates on the table. The kitchen was warm from the stove, and the smell of roasted chicken and vegetables filled the air. He'd changed into a clean shirt, she noticed, and had made an effort to tame his hair. "Smells wonderful," she said, taking the seat across from him. "Nothing special. I'm used to cooking for one." He served her a portion, then himself, with efficient movements that spoke of long practice. They ate in relative silence, the only sounds the clink of silverware and the distant call of evening birds. Isabella found herself stealing glances at him, trying to read the man who would be her husband. His hands were scarred from work, but his movements were precise and careful. When he did speak, it was about practical matters, whether the harvest, the neighbors who lived 5 miles down the road. "The preacher will come by tomorrow," he said as they finished eating. "Make it official." Of course. She had expected this, but hearing it said aloud made her stomach flutter with nerves. Are you having second thoughts? The question was blunt, but his tone held a note of something that might have been concerned. No, she said, meeting his gaze. Are you? I don't make promises I can't keep. He stood, collecting their plates. You should know that about me. What else should I know? He paused at the sink, his back to her. That I'm not looking for. Love, Isabella. I'm looking for partnership. Someone to share the work, the responsibilities. Someone to help build something lasting. And if love comes anyway, it won't. The certainty in his voice was absolute. I've seen what love does. To people. How it makes them weak. Careless. I've built a good life here, and I won't risk it for something that unpredictable. Isabella felt something tighten in her chest, but she kept her voice steady. I understand. Not looking for fairy tales either. He turned to face her then. And she caught a glimpse of something in his eye, saproval, perhaps, or relief. Good. Then we understand each other. As she helped him clean up their movements, careful not to touch, Isabella wondered what had made him so certain that love was a weakness. She had her own reasons for being cautious, to many years of hoping for affection that never came, of trying to make herself indispensable to people who saw her as nothing more than an obligation. But as she watched Nathan move through his evening routines with practiced efficiency, she sensed that his walls were built not just from disappointment, but from something deeper. Something that had taught him that caring too much was a luxury he couldn't afford. Later, as she lay in her narrow bed listening to the sounds of the house settling around her, Isabella made herself a promise. She would be the partner he needed, the wife he had bargained for. She would ask for nothing more than what he was willing to give. But deep in her heart, in a place she was careful not to examine too closely, she wondered if a man who could build such a beautiful house, who could prepare a meal with such care, who could look at her with such guarded intensity, was truly as immune to love as he claimed to be. The night wind whispered through the wheat fields, carrying with it the scent of growing things and the promise of harvest. Mara would bring new challenges, new negotiations in this careful dance they were learning. But tonight, for the first time in years, Isabella fell asleep feeling like she belonged somewhere. Even if that somewhere came with walls she had yet to learn how to climb. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen window as Isabella prepared breakfast, her movements careful and deliberate. 3 weeks had passed since their wedding, God-brief ceremony with the preacher, and 2 neighbors as witnesses, and they had settled into a rhythm that felt almost natural. Almost. Nathan came in from the barn just as she was setting the eggs on the table, his clothes already dusty from the morning chores. He washed his hands at the pump, the sound of water splashing into the basin, filling the comfortable silence between them. Fields are ready for harvest, he said, taking his place across from her. I'll be working long days for the next 2 weeks. Is there anything I can do to help? Looked up from his plate, and she caught something in his expression, surprise. Perhaps that she had offered. You've been doing plenty. House hasn't been this organized in years. It was true. Isabella had thrown herself into making the farmhouse a home, not just for him, but for herself. She had sewn curtains from fabric she'd found in town, arranged wildflowers in mason jars, and organized his books by subject rather than the haphazard way he'd kept them. Small changes, but ones that made the space feel warmer, more lived in. I like keeping busy, she said, which was only part of the truth. The whole truth was that she liked taking care of him, liked seeing his face when he came home to find fresh bread cooling on the counter, or his favorite shirt mended and pressed. She had learned to read his moods in the set of his shoulders, the way his hands moved when he was thinking, the rare moments when his carefully controlled expression softened. Mrs. Henderson stopped by yesterday while you were in the south field, she continued. She invited us to the harvest dance next Saturday. Nathan's fork paused halfway to his mouth. We don't need to go to that. Don't need to. No. Could she seem to think it would be good for us to meet more of the neighbors properly? You've met them. I've met them as your wife. It's different from meeting them as myself. He set down his fork, studying her. And what's the difference? Isabella chose her words carefully. When people meet the woman who married Nathan Carter, they make assumptions. They think they know why I'm here, what I want. At a dance, they might see me as Isabella. Just Isabella. And that matters to you. It does. He was quiet for a long moment, turning his coffee cup in his hands. I'm not much of a dancer, neither am I, but I'm told it's not about the dancing. Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face, says Henderson. She may have mentioned that the real purpose is gossip and pie judging. This time he did smile, just slightly. She's not wrong. Fine. We'll go. But I'm not staying late. Of course not. They finished breakfast in their usual comfortable quiet, but Isabella felt something had shifted between them. It was small. This agreement to attend a social gathering together, but it felt like progress. It's like he was allowing her to be more than just a housekeeper who happened to share his name. That afternoon, while Nathan worked in the fields, Isabella walked too. Town to buy fabric for a new dress. The general store was busy, filled with women discussing the upcoming dance and the latest news from the neighboring towns. Isabella listened more than she spoke, still learning the rhythms of this community she was now part of. Mrs. Carter, called a voice from across the store. Isabella turned to see Sarah Mitchell, the banker's wife, approaching with a warm smile. How wonderful to see you. How are you settling in? Very well, thank you. Everyone has been so welcoming. And Nathan, you've been alone out there for so long, we were beginning to wonder if he'd ever take a wife. Boila smiled politely, but the question stung. She had heard variations of it from several people always phrased as concern for Nathan's well-being, but carrying an undertone of curiosity about what kind of woman would agree to marry a man known for his solitary ways. He's been very kind, she said, which was true enough. Nathan was unfailingly polite, considerate in his way. He left fresh coffee for her in the mornings, chopped extra wood without being asked, and had even brought her wildflowers once, though. He'd presented them so matter-of-factly that she might have thought it was a business transaction if not for the careful way he'd arranged them. I'm sure he has, Sarah said, her tone suggesting she found this hard to believe. He's always been so focused on his work. Quite serious. There's nothing wrong with being serious about the things that matter. Oh, of course not. I just meant, well, I hope he knows how to have a little fun, too. Marriage should be about more than just work, don't you think? Isabella's smile felt strained. We're very happy. It was both true and not true. They were content, she and Nathan. They had found a way to coexist that didn't require either of them to compromise their essential selves. But happy? That was a more complicated question. She was happy when she watched him read in the evenings, his face relaxed in the lamplight. Happy when he complimented her cooking or noticed some small improvement she'd made to the house. Happy in the quiet moments when they worked side by side, no words needed. But she was also aware of the careful distance he maintained, the way he never quite relaxed completely in her presence. As if he was constantly reminding himself that this was an arrangement, not a romance. As if he was afraid that forgetting, even for a moment, might lead to something dangerous. That evening, as she hemmed her new dress by lamplight, Isabella found herself thinking about the question Sarah had raised. Did Nathan know how to have fun? In all their weeks together, she had never seen him truly laugh, never caught him in a moment of pure joy. He seemed to carry himself with the weight of someone who had learned early that pleasure was a luxury he couldn't afford. Pretty dress, Nathan said from the doorway, startling her from her thoughts. Thank you. The dance. It's fine. He lingered in the doorway, not quite entering the room but not leaving either. You don't have to go, you know. If you'd rather not, I want to go. With you. Why? The question was so direct, so unexpected, that Isabella had to think about her answer. Because I want to see you outside of this house. I want to see how you are with other people. What you were like before I came here. I was exactly the same, were you? She set down her sewing and looked at him. I don't think so. I think you were lonelier than you let yourself admit. Nathan's jaw tightened. Loneliness is a choice, Isabella, like everything else. Is it? Or is it just what we tell ourselves to make isolation feel like power? For a moment she thought he might let her glimpse whatever lay beneath his careful composure. But instead, he stepped back into the hallway. Good night, Isabella. Good night, Nathan. She listened to his footsteps, retreating down the hall, then returned to her sewing. But her hands were trembling slightly, and she had to set the dress aside. She was walking a dangerous line, she knew. Pushing too hard, asking too much. But she was beginning to understand that Nathan's walls weren't just keeping the world out. They were keeping him in. And she was starting to suspect that somewhere, inside that fortress he'd built around his heart, there was a man who might be worth knowing. The question was whether he would ever trust her enough to let her find out. The harvest dance was held in the town's largest barn. Transformed for the evening with lanterns strung from the rafters and tables laden with food prepared by every family in the county, Isabella smoothed her new dress of soft blue that brought outer Isan took Nathan's offered arm as they approached the entrance. "Remember," he said quietly, "we don't have to stay long." "I remember." She squeezed his arm gently. "Thank you for coming with me." Inside, the barn buzzed with conversation and laughter. A small group of musicians had set up in one corner, their fiddles and guitar creating a lively backdrop to the festivities. Children ran between the adults, their shrieks of delight adding to the cheerful chaos. "Nathan Carter," boomed a voice. From across the room, a broad-shouldered man with graying hair approached them, his hand extended. "Good to see you, son. And this must be the missus." "Isabella, this is Tom Henderson. He owns the spread north of mine. Mrs. Carter." Tom's handshake was firm, his smile genuine. "Welcome to our little community. I hope Nathan's been treating you well." "Very well, thank you. He'd better be. We've been trying to civilize this one for years." Tom clapped Nathan on the shoulder. "Come on, let's get you folks some of my wife's famous apple cider." As they made their way through the crowd, Isabella noticed how people's faces lit up when they saw Nathan. Despite his reputation for solitude, he was clearly well-liked and respected. But she also noticed how he held himself apart, accepting greetings with polite nods while maintaining a careful distance. "You're popular," she observed, when they found a quiet corner with their drinks. "I do good work. People appreciate that." "Is that all it is?" He looked at her sharply. "What do you mean? Maybe people like you for more than just your farming skills. Maybe they like you because you're a good man, even if you don't want to admit it." Before he could respond, the music shifted to a slower tune, and couples began moving toward the makeshift dance floor. Isabella watched them, noting the easy affection between husbands and wives, the way they looked at each other as they swayed to the music. "Would you like to dance?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. Nathan's face went carefully blank. "I told you I'm not much of a dancer. Neither am I, but it's just one song." For a moment she thought he would refuse. Then, with visible reluctance, he set down his cup and offered her his hand. One song. His hand was warm and calloused, larger than hers in a way that made her feel surprisingly delicate. On the dance floor, he placed his other hand at her waist, with careful formality, maintaining a proper distance between them.
"Oh."
"Steps," he said, his voice tight. "Just follow the music. Feel how it moves." They began to sway, awkward at first, both of them too conscious of the space between them and the eyes watching from around the room.
"Oh."
But gradually, as the music continued, some of the tension left Nathan's shoulders. He was actually a decent dancer, Isabella realized, once he stopped thinking about it so much. "This isn't so bad," she said softly. "No," he admitted, "it's not." She could feel the warmth of his body through her dress, smell the clean scent of his soap and the faint trace of his work hay and leather and something uniquely him. When she looked up at his face, she found him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "What?" she asked. "Nothing. Just you look nice tonight." "Thank you." The song was ending, but neither of them moved to separate. In fact, Nathan's hand at her waist had tightened slightly, drawing her incrementally closer. For a moment, Isabella thought he might kiss her. The possibility hung in the air between them like a challenge. Then the music stopped, and he stepped back abruptly, his walls slamming back into place. "I need some air," he said, and walked away, leaving her standing alone on the dance floor. Isabella felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment and something deeper disappointment that cut sharper than she'd expected. She made her way to the refreshment table, trying to look as if nothing had happened, but she could feel the curious glances from the other women. Everything all right, dear? Mrs. Henderson appeared at her elbow, concern written across her motherly face. Fine. Just a little warm in here, and can be such fools sometimes, Mrs. Henderson said gently. Especially men like Nathan who've been on their own too long. They forget how to be around people. He's not a fool, Isabella said, surprised by the fierceness in her own voice. He's just careful. Careful, yes. But maybe too careful for his own good. Mrs. Henderson patted her arm. Give him time, dear. Some walls take longer to come down than others. Isabella found Nathan outside, leaning against the barn wall and staring up at the star-filled sky. Music from inside was muffled but still audible, and she could see other couples taking advantage of the cool night air. Ready to go home? He asked, without looking at her. If you are. They walked to their wagon in silence, the tension between them thick enough to cut. Nathan helped her up to the seat with his usual courtesy, but his touch was brief, impersonal. The ride home was quiet except for the clip-clop of the horses' hooves and the distant sound of night insects. Isabella stared at the familiar landscape, silver-painted in the moonlight, and tried to make sense of what had happened between them. I'm sorry, Nathan said suddenly. For what? For leaving you standing there. It was rude. Yes, it was. He glanced at her, seeming surprised by her directness. I'm not used to... that, being close to someone like that. Like what? Like, it matters. The honesty in his voice caught her off guard. She turned to study his profile in the moonlight, noting the tension in his jaw, the way his hands gripped the reins. Does it matter, I mean? That's the problem? His voice was barely above a whisper. I don't know anymore. They didn't speak again until they reached the farmhouse. Nathan unhitched the horse while Isabella went inside to light the lamps. By the time he came in, she had changed into her nightgown and robe and was brewing tea in the kitchen. Thought you might want some, she said, gesturing to the pot. Thank you. They sat at the kitchen table, the same table where they shared their meals, where they'd negotiated the terms of their arrangement weeks ago, but something had changed between them tonight. The careful distance they'd maintained was no longer quite so careful, no longer quite so sustainable. I married you for practical reasons, Nathan said suddenly. I want you to know that. I know. But I'm starting to want things I didn't plan on wanting. Isabella's heart began to beat faster. What kind of things? Things that could ruin everything we've built here. Things that could make me weak, or things that could make you happy. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw something raw and vulnerable in his eyes. I don't know how to be happy, Isabella. I don't know how to let someone matter without losing myself. You don't have to lose yourself. Maybe you just have to find a bigger version of who you are. What if I can't? What if I'm too broken for that? The question hung between them like a confession. Isabella reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. His fingers were warm, slightly trembling. Then we'll figure it out together, she said. That's what partners do. For a moment she thought he might pull away, might retreat. Back behind his walls, instead he turned his hand over and threaded his fingers through hers. I'm scared, he admitted. I know. So am I of me. Of this. Of wanting something I might not be able to have. They sat in the lamplight, holding hands across the table, both of them balanced on the edge of something that could change everything. Outside, the night wind whispered through the wheat fields, carrying the promise of harvest and the possibility of new beginnings. Neither of them spoke of love. They weren't ready for that word yet. But in the space between them, in the warmth of their joined hands and the honesty of their shared fear, something was growing. Something that might, in time, become strong enough to break down the walls they'd both built around their hearts. The question was whether they would be brave enough to let it. October arrived with a vengeance, bringing with it the first hard frost and an early snowfall that caught everyone off guard. Isabella woke to find the world transformed outside her window, the fields covered in a pristine white blanket that made everything look clean and new. In the weeks since the harvest dance, something had shifted between her and Nathan. The change was subtle, but unmistakable, lingering glances across the breakfast table. Conversations that ran deeper than discussions of weather and chores, small touches that seemed to happen more frequently. He still maintained his careful distance. But the walls were showing cracks, Storm's coming, Nathan said as he came in from the barn, stamping snow from his boots. Big one, by the look of those clouds. Isabella looked up from her mending. How long do you think it will last? Could be days. I've brought in extra firewood and checked all the shutters. We'll be fine, but we might be stuck inside for a while. By evening, the wind was howling around the house with a fury that made the windows rattle. Snow fell so thick and fast that Isabella couldn't see the barn from the kitchen window. Nathan built up the fire in the living room and dragged extra blankets downstairs. Might as well be comfortable, he said, settling into the chair across from her. This could go on all night. Isabella had been reading, but she set her book aside and watched him in the firelight. His dark hair was mussed from the wind, and his cheeks were still red from the cold. There was something about the storm, the sense of being cut off from the world, that made the space between them feel more intimate. Tell me about before, she said suddenly. Before what? Before you built this place, before you decided you needed a wife. What were you like when you were young? Nathan's expression grew guarded. Not much to tell. I don't believe that. He was quiet for so long that Isabella thought he wouldn't answer. Then almost reluctantly he began to speak. I grew up in town. My father was a carpenter. My mother took in sewing. We weren't poor, but we weren't wealthy either. It's just ordinary people trying to make a living. What happened to them? Fever took them when I was 19. Both of them within a week. His voice was carefully neutral, but Isabella could hear the old pain beneath it. I stayed in town for a few years after that, worked with another carpenter. But I couldn't. Everything reminded me of them. So I came out here, bought this land, and started over. That must have been lonely. Lonely was better than hurting all the time. Isabella felt something clench in her chest. You've been alone ever since? Mostly. He stared into the fire, his face half in shadow. There was someone once, a woman in town, Martha. The name hit Isabella like a physical blow, though she tried not to show it. What happened? I thought I loved her. Thought she loved me too. But when I asked her to marry me, to come out here with me, she said she couldn't live so far from civilization. Said she needed people, needed society. His laugh was bitter. She said I was too serious to set in my ways, that I'd never be happy and I'd make her unhappy too. She was wrong. Was she? He looked at Isabella directly. I've been alone for 8 years, Isabella. 8 years of telling myself that being alone was better than being hurt, that needing someone was weakness, and now I don't know what I think anymore. He stood abruptly and walked to the window, though there was nothing to see but swirling snow. You've changed things, changed me. How? I catch myself looking forward to coming in from the fields because I know you'll be here. I find myself wanting to tell you things, share things I've never told anyone, and it terrifies me. Isabella rose and moved to stand beside him at the window. Why does it terrify you? Because caring about someone gives them the power to destroy you. I've already been destroyed once. I don't think I could survive it again. So you'd rather feel nothing than risk feeling too much? Didn't. You? She considered the question seriously. I used to think so. I spent years in that orphanage watching children get adopted, watching families choose everyone but me. I learned to stop hoping, to stop caring, because it hurt too much when they left. And now I think that choosing to feel nothing isn't really living at all. It's just surviving. Nathan turned to face her, and in the firelight, she could see the struggle written across his features. I don't know how to do this, Isabella. I don't know how to let someone in without losing myself. You don't have to do it all at once. Just ... Don't shut me out completely. Let me help carry some of the weight. What if I hurt you? What if you don't? They stood there in the flickering light, the storm raging outside, and Isabella felt as if they were balanced on the edge of a precipice. One of them had to take the leap, had to trust that the other would be there to catch them. I want to try, Nathan said finally, his voice barely audible above the wind. I want to try to be the man you deserve. I don't need you to be anyone. But yourself? Then you don't know what you're asking for. Yes, I do. She reached up and touched his cheek, feeling the rough stubble beneath her palm. I'm asking for you, Nathan, all of you, the good and the bad, the strong and the broken. I'm asking you to trust me with your heart." He closed his eyes and leaned into her touch. "I'm so tired of being alone." "Then don't be." The words hung between them like a promise. When Nathan opened his eyes, Isabella saw something in them she'd never seen before. Hope, tentative and fragile, but real. "I can't promise it will be easy," he said. "I never asked for easy. I can't promise I won't. Mess this up. I probably will too." They mess up and forgive each other and try again. "If I can't be the husband you want, then we'll figure out how to be the husband and wife we need to be." Nathan's hand came up to cover hers where it rested against his cheek. "I think I'm falling in love with you," he said, the words torn from somewhere deep inside him. "It scares the hell out of me." Isabella felt tears prick her eyes. "I think I'm falling in love with you too, even though I'm difficult and stubborn and don't know how to talk about feelings, especially because of that." He laughed then, a real laugh that transformed his entire face. "You're either very brave or very foolish. Maybe both. Definitely both." He pulled her closer until there was barely an inch between them. "I want to kiss you. What's stopping you?" "The knowledge that once I do, there's no going back. This arrangement we made, this careful distance we've maintained, it'll be over." "Good," Isabella said fiercely. "I'm tired of pretending this is just an arrangement. I'm tired of pretending I don't care about you. I don't know how to do this." "Right, neither do I. We'll learn together." Nathan's other hand came up to frame her face, his thumbs brushing away tears she hadn't realized were falling. "I love you," he said, testing the words. "I love you, Isabella Carter. I love you too." When he kissed her, it was with 8 years of loneliness and longing behind it. Gentle at first, then deeper as she responded, her arms winding around his neck. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. "The storm's getting worse," Nathan said, but he didn't let go of her. "I don't care. We might lose power. I don't care." "The fire's getting low, Nathan." "Yes, stop making excuses." He smiled, and it was like watching the sun come out after a long winter. "Yes, ma'am." They built up the fire together, spreading blankets on the floor in front of the hearth. Outside, the storm raged with increasing fury, but inside, they were warm and safe and no longer alone. As they settled by the fire, Isabella in the circle of Nathan's arms, she thought about the walls they'd both built to protect themselves from pain. Tonight, those walls had finally come down, not destroyed, but transformed into something that could shelter them both. "What are you thinking about?" Nathan asked, his voice rumbling in his chest beneath her cheek. "About how sometimes the things we think will destroy us are actually the things that save us." "Like what? Like letting someone matter? Like admitting we need each other?" Nathan's arms tightened around her. "I never thought I'd be grateful for a snowstorm." "Why?" "Because it gave me an excuse to stop running from this." "From you?" Isabella turned in his arms so she could see his face. "You weren't running from me. You were running from yourself. Same thing in the end." "No, it's not."
Oh.
"Running from me would have meant sending me away. Running from yourself just meant you were afraid to be happy. And now you get to choose. Every day, you get to choose whether to be happy or whether to be afraid." Nathan traced the line of her cheek with his finger. "What if I choose wrong? Then you choose again the next day." That's the beauty of love, Nathan. It's not a decision you make once and then it's done. It's a decision you make over and over every day for the rest of your life. Every day. Every day. He was quiet for a moment, considering this. "I think I can do that." "I know you can." Outside, the wind howled and the snow continued to fall.
Out.
But inside their little farmhouse, two people who had learned to live without love were discovering that they no longer had to. The storm would pass, spring would come, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead together. But for now, the warmth of the firelight and the safety of each other's arms, they were exactly where they needed to be. Spring arrived early that year, as if the world itself had decided it was time for new beginnings. Isabella stood in the garden she'd planted behind the house, watching the first green shoots push through the dark soil. Her hand rested on the gentle curve of her belly, where new life was growing, a miracle she and Nathan had discovered. just weeks after the storm that had changed everything between them. "You're supposed to be resting," Nathan said from behind her, his voice carrying the gentle, scolding tone he'd adopted since learning about the baby. "I am resting. I'm just resting outside." "That's not what the doctor said." Isabella turned to face him, noting the worry lines that had appeared around his eyes. "The doctor said I should avoid heavy lifting and get plenty of rest. He didn't say I couldn't enjoy my own garden." Nathan moved to stand beside her, his hand joining hers on her stomach. Even through the fabric of her dress, she could feel the warmth of his palm, the careful reverence with which he touched her now. "I just want you to be safe. Both of you. We're safe and we're happy." She covered his hand with her free one. "Aren't we happier than I ever thought possible?" It was true. In the months since that snowy night, when they'd finally admitted their love, Nathan had slowly but steadily emerged from behind the walls he'd built around his heart. He smiled more now, laughed at her jokes, shared stories of his childhood, and dreams for their future. The transformation hadn't been sudden or dramatic, it had been gradual. Like watching a flower bloom, each day bringing small but significant changes. "Mrs. Henderson stopped by while you were in town," Isabella said. "She wants to organize a quilting bee for the baby."
So,
"She's been trying to organize a quilting bee for something ever since we moved here." Well, now she has a good excuse. Isabella leaned into his side, enjoying the solid warmth of him. "She also mentioned that the miller's eldest boy has been asking about work. She thought you might need help with the spring planting." Nathan considered this. "I might. The farm's doing well enough now that I could afford to hire help. And with the baby coming, you don't have to decide right now." "No, but I should. Think about it. Plan for it." He turned to face her fully, his expression serious. "I want to be a good father, Isabella. I want to be the kind of man our child can be proud of." "You already are. I wasn't always. I was bitter for so long. Angry at the world? What if I pass that on to our child?" "You won't. How can you be so sure?" Isabella reached up to touch his face, noting how the harsh lines had softened over the past months. "Because the man I married, the real man, not the one hiding behind walls, is kind and generous and good. That's who our child will know. If it's not enough, then we'll figure it out together. That's what we do, remember? We figure things out together." Nathan smiled, the expression coming easier now than it had in the beginning. "I love you. You know that?" "I know. I love you too. Even when I'm being overprotective and ridiculous? Especially then." They stood together in the garden, surrounded by the promise of new growth. And Isabella marveled at how much had changed since that first day, when she'd stepped off the wagon with nothing but a worn suitcase and a heart full of hope she'd been afraid to acknowledge. "I've been thinking," Nathan said suddenly. "About what?" "About expanding the house, adding on a proper nursery, maybe a bigger kitchen. Something that says family lives here instead of bachelor farmer who doesn't know how to make a home. This is already a home." "Nathan, you made it a home the day you chose to let me in. It could be better. It could be the kind of place where children want to bring their friends, where neighbors want to gather, the kind of place that welcomes people instead of keeping them." Isabella felt tears prick her eyes. "You want to tear down the walls completely. I want to build something better in their place, something that shelters us without shutting us off from the world." "What brought this on?" Nathan was quiet for a moment, his gaze distant. "I was thinking about Martha the other day, not about what she said when I asked her to marry me." Isabella felt a familiar pang at the mention of his former love, but it was gentler now, more understanding than jealous. "What about it?" She said I was too serious to set in my ways, that I'd never be happy, and I'd make her unhappy too. He looked at Isabella with wonder in his eyes. "She was wrong about the first party. I'm happy. Happier than I ever thought possible, but she was right about the second part." "I would have made her unhappy." "How do you know?" "Because she needed things I couldn't give her then. She needed someone who could be spontaneous, who could laugh easily, who could open his heart without calculating the cost. I couldn't be that person for her, but I can be that person for you, for our child. Nathan, I'm not the same man who let fear make his decisions for him. I'm not the same man who thought love was a weakness." He pulled her closer, his forehead resting against hers. "You changed me, Isabella. Made me want to be better. To be worthy of the love you offered, you were always worthy. No, I wasn't. But I am now. I want to spend the rest of my life proving it. The baby chose that moment to move, a flutter of life that made them both gasp with wonder. Nathan's hand pressed more firmly against her stomach, and his face lit up with a joy so pure it took Isabella's breath away. "Did you feel that?" he whispered. "I felt it, our child. Your family." Yes. They stood there in the garden, surrounded by the promise of spring and the certainty of love, and Isabella thought about the walls they'd both built to protect themselves from pain. Those walls had served their purpose, keeping them safe when safety was what they needed most. But now they needed something different. Now they needed connection, openness, the courage to be vulnerable with each other and with the world. "Have an idea?" she said suddenly. "For the house additions. What if we design them so that the front door opens directly into the main living area? So that when people come to visit, they're welcomed into the heart of our home, right? Away?" Nathan's smile was radiant. No barriers. No barriers. Just an open door and a warm welcome. Just love. As the sun set over the wheat fields, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, Nathan and Isabella Carter stood in their garden and planned their future. They would build their addition, hire help for the farm, raise their child in a home filled with love and laughter. They would host harvest dances and quilting bees, welcome neighbors and strangers alike. But most importantly, they would continue to choose love over fear, connection over isolation, hope over despair. They would choose each other every day, for the rest of their lives. The walls they'd built to protect themselves had served their purpose. It was time to build something better. Now it was time to build out, but a home that welcomed it in. A place where love could grow and flourish, where two people who had learned to live without it could teach their children that it was worth the risk. As they walked back to the house, hand in hand, Isabella felt the baby move again, a gentle reminder of the new life they were creating together. Soon there would be 3 of them, then perhaps more. They would fill their home with laughter and stories, with the beautiful chaos of a family that chose to love despite the risks. The walls were coming down, replaced by something infinitely stronger foundation of a life built on trust, understanding, and the courage to be vulnerable with the people who mattered most. And in the kitchen, as Nathan helped her prepare dinner, and they moved around each other with the easy familiarity of 2 people who had learned to be a team, Isabella knew that they had found something worth keeping, not the careful arrangement they'd started with, but something real and lasting and true. Love. Finally, blessedly, completely love.